But I think when you are really pushed to shove and you're like, okay, this is what you need to do for what you love, are you willing to transform yourself? Are you willing to open up the space to adapt to the new things?
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. And don't forget to click the subscribe button if you're not already subscribing. I have so many great episodes coming up for you, including with Ashley Lemieux about her brand new book. So much good stuff for the heart and soul coming up. Speaking of good stuff for the heart and soul, that's what you're going to get today. Today, you're going to hear from Novell Loh. She was a former corporate warrior, director at a top private equity firm in New York City. But then, a series of sudden, heartbreaking life events made her question her life tenets and beliefs. She decided to quit that big job and chase childhood dreams of becoming a professional dancer. She's been training, traveling, performing, and competing with the best, even at the 2019 World Championships in Ireland. She's recently founded Money Boss LLC, a financial education platform to spread awareness and understanding so that anyone can have financial freedom. In this conversation, we talk about what those events were, what happened to her in her life that made her question everything she believed. What were those questions she was asking? What she realized life was about when she was close to losing her own life. We talk about what it was like to follow the passion to dance, the challenges that have come up because of it. She has some really, really good advice for you about following your heart. And we even talk about the struggle between ego and passion. There's so much good stuff in this conversation. I hope you enjoy it, so let's get to it. Novell, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you today and for you to share your story. I want to start when you are working in corporate, you're in finance, you're making a lot of money, everything's really successful, but then you have an aha moment that you need to have a change. Tell me about that aha moment.
Yeah. This was about 5 years ago, and that aha moment was actually a series of aha moment. So the first was that, at the time I was in New York, doing really, really well. And all of a sudden I received a call. Actually, it was a Facebook message that my mom was in an accident. And I didn't know how bad it was, but I was actually on a vacation. And basically, by the time I flew home to Malaysia, it was really, she was in a really bad state. I didn't get to say goodbye to her. She was already in a coma. And basically she passed the next day. So that was a huge shock to me, because I've actually, up until then, I haven't really experienced death. And not to mention, like, that was the closest person to my life. And it was so sudden that it really shook my whole world. Now looking back, I was like, wow, like what just happened? And where did she go? What does death means? So a lot of those kind of like came into my head. So that was like the first big event that happened. And then after that, half a year later, I had my own health scare. I'm, young, and like I'm an athlete and everything was fine. I was just feeling a little tired, and I went to the doctor for my ordinary checkup. And she said, oh, you're probably just tired. And 3 days later, she called me. And this was July 4th weekend. I remember I was like going to the beach. And she called me. She was like, Novell, you have to go to the hospital now. And I said, well, I'm going to the beach. What happens if I don't go? Or like, can it wait for 2 days? Like, what is the worst that could happen? And she's like, you are at the risk of a heart failure at any point in time now.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was like, it shook me a lot. So then basically I was, I went into the hospital, like they put me first in line, You know you're in
Yeah.
trouble when you go to the
Yeah.
emergency room and they put your first in line, admitted right away. Basically was transfused with a few pints of blood. They didn't know what was happening to me. They just knew that my blood count was so low that like my heart could stop pumping because of the lack of blood
Wow.
at a time. So yeah, so that was like, whew, like another wake up call. So
Mm-hmm.
those two things, plus when my mom passed, I began asking the question. I was like, oh, what is life? What is life about? Like, why are we here? And when do we leave?
Mm-hmm.
So like those questions were big.
Yeah. What did you come to in those questions? Those are really hard questions to be asking, especially in the midst of so much grief of losing such an important person in your life.
Yeah, like I think I still ask those questions,
Mm-hmm.
even until today. Um, what I came to realization is that I think we all have uh, a purpose in life, but what that purpose is, you get to decide, and you get to decide if you want to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when the purpose is done, then I think it's time. Like our purpose on Earth, or like our work on Earth is done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the conclusion kind of that I came to. But that's also why I'm so passionate about really going after what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because without realizing that, without having those two events happen to my life and so closely, like I think it really wouldn't have knocked me to my senses.
Tell me about having that realization of how close you came to losing your life. What were you thinking when you thought, when you realized, oh my goodness, I was this close?
Yeah, actually, the first time when I got admitted, right, I was still like, oh, okay, like it didn't really hit me. I still didn't understand what it was. I know that I got transfused with two big bags of blood. And then I remember I had to, 2 weeks later, I had to go back to the hospital again in emergency care. And what shook me, like what was the wake up call was when the doctor who attended to me basically told me, and when he was the look on his face, and he looked at me, he said, Novell, I can't transfuse you with another bag of blood right now because your level is still okay. But within the last 2 weeks, you lost another pint of blood. And that's not good news. You're not bleeding, right, externally, but we don't know what is happening, but it is not good.
Hmm.
And I remember just when I was looking at him, and the concerned face, like the very concerned face. And then they referred me to the oncology department. And I was like, looking at my phone, I was like, what is the oncology department? I was like, which part of the body is that? And when I looked it up and I saw the word cancer, I was like, whoa, like I think that plus the look on his face was when I knew like how serious it was.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Being in that place, what did that teach you about life and being alive?
Like I have goosebumps just listening to your question earlier. This question. We so often take for granted the little things in life, like the most basic thing, like family, friends, good weather, air to breathe. Like we take for granted these things. And I didn't know how fragile life was until, of course, until when my mom passed. I'm like, okay, that is what death means. And then I'm like, okay, maybe that only happens to older people. And then I'm like, so when that happens to me, I'm like, wow, life is so fragile. Like it can, you can be alive one day happy, and like I was dancing, I was like, going out to nightclubs and everything. And then the next day that could happen. So how close we are to that, I think that was the biggest realization for me.
Mm-hmm. And they never found out what was going on with you, right? I want to address that
Yeah,
before we
actually,
move on.
yeah. For 6 months, I went from the oncology department to the hematology department, and I remember, I think, going to one other department, and did they roll me in right to for kind of like a minor surgery to check if I was bleeding on the inside, and the doctor was like, "Oh, what are you doing here? You're too young to be here." So yeah, so long story short, I went in and out of the hospital for 6 months. And in the end, they're like, well, we can't find, we don't know what is wrong. But you can, come back every 3 months and check on your blood level. So I consider that like a small little miracle. And it's like life's, unique way of telling me that something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
I really believe in that.
you had a miracle. I mean, incredible miracle. You had these big realizations about what life is and what matters in life. So what was the next step for you? What did you know needed to change?
So what I thought to myself is that, like, time is the most important thing in life. It's not money, it's not prestige, it's not like all these other things. Like without time, then there really is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing that went through my head. So then I asked myself, like, okay, if I die today, which I was so close to, I was like, what would I regret? And then, like, without a doubt, I was like, dance. I've always loved being a dancer. Ever since I was a little kid, I have these collections of like the swan lakes and like the rhythmic gymnast, like all of those things. And I was like, I really want to be a professional dancer. And I'm like, okay, so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then after, when reality hits, I was like, okay, really? Like, Novell, are you really going to do that? You have a mortgage, you have like, you get paid so well every single month. And like, you're staying in this fancy apartment, you go for these vacations. So then, like the fears.
Right. How
So
hard was it to
yeah,
walk away not only from the financial stability, but also what you knew, what you were taught? You did everything by the book, what you knew to
yeah.
be a good life, right? How hard was it to walk away from that?
I will say actually, because of the experiences that I had, being so close to death, it wasn't actually that difficult.
Mm,
It was more of like, how am I going to do that?
mm,
So I have to make sure that I'm doing it responsibly, or, like making sure that I'm like at least covered financially. And I also think that part of me, like, when those two events happen, I almost feel like I was reborn again, because you
mm,
question your beliefs.
mhm.
So in a way, I had that childlike curiosity of like, wow, that is my dream. I wanna go after it. So I was like excited. I was afraid, but I was more excited.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like you have many kids, Danielle. So I'm sure, like, how when your kids was like, oh, I want to do this, and they may have a little bit of fear, but like they just do it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I think I was even that way when I started the podcast. Like that you're at that building point where you're like, okay, I can start from scratch. When you got on the dance floor for the first time, you had left your job, you got on the dance floor, how did you know you were in the right place?
Uh, this is actually something that I struggle with actually quite a bit. Because I still actually struggle to I don't want to say the word fit in, but I guess I'm always still scared when
Mhm,
I get onto the dance floor. Um, I do think that is more mental though for me,
mhm, mhm,
right? Because as an artist, it is never enough. It's never perfect. Like, you can always improve yourself.
mhm,
But what is, I think, important is that you know that you you are there because you want to be. So even though I'm scared, like even though I still get like butterflies in my stomach, like my hearts are racing, I just feel that I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the most important thing,
Mm-hmm.
that freedom.
Have you learned anything from dancing?
Oh, so many things. I thought
I,
I knew a lot about life. I think it challenged me in, what is interesting is I always feel like I've lived two lives now, because it challenges me and develops the other part of me that may have been, let's just say, a little more underdeveloped.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the curiosity, the creativeness, the vulnerability, like all those things that being in corporate finance, have sort of maybe taken a little bit on the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What have you learned about yourself through this experience?
For myself, I think I've learned that we're actually very flexible if we allow ourselves to be. And that's actually usually not something I would say about myself, because I'm quite like like quite a rigid person. I follow the rules and like, okay, this is the way how things go.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you are really pushed to shove and you're like, okay, this is what you need to do for what you love, are you willing to transform yourself? Are you willing to open up the space to adapt to the new things?
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of things that I have to learn. So I think being flexible and knowing that at any age you can do it if you choose to put your mind into it, I think that's one of the greatest things.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the age, and I know that's a challenge getting into the dance scene a little older than people who are probably like right out of dance school, right? Tell me about the challenges with that.
Ooh, I would say actually that's probably one of the biggest challenge. I didn't really think about it initially. Like, okay, I know like I didn't start when I was 5 years old, right? And it didn't really even get to me when I was in these camps. And you see like, okay, the 5-year old, the 8-year old, and then the 12-year old, by the time they're 15, they're like close to being world champions. And I train with these people because I
Mm-hmm.
train at like one of the best schools in New York, and we all dance together and train together. Um, I think it was maybe less of the age, but more of the when um when I stopped my last career, I was kind of like up there. Like you're respected. People was like, they want to be with you. They want to get your advice, and you feel like you have so much to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And then now you're like the baby in the class. Not only the baby, but a big baby. So that was a very, I think, humbling experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was definitely not easy. Like now looking back, I think that was a big growing pain in that.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I think I'm much more stronger right now to take on whatever is next.
What did you learn about growth in that situation where suddenly you're in a spot where you're not the most respected, where you're not the one everyone's coming to for questions and they want to be around you? What was the growing that occurred inside of you?
um the growing. Well, I think to learn to be humble. Like I it's quite hard for me to say that, but I think it is very true. Like imagine like I've been like groomed to be one of the best in what I used to do. Like I remember when we had or when I had my year-end performance review, and it was like a matrix between performance and potential. And I was like one out of like 4 people in a whole team of, let's just say, I think it was 300 people, that was like high performance and high potential. So that, I think, going that to like the baby, I think to really understand, to get back to that feeling of the newness in things, being the beginner, and we don't know it all. And sometimes we can let it get to our heads when we, are very successful externally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think humility and being humble.
You've had to wrestle a little bit with the ego then.
Oh yeah, I think a little bit is an understatement, but yes, I'm very, very honest.
Well, I mean, I understand this because I was very, very good at news anchoring. I mean, like I had wanted to do it since I was in third grade. So I was literally practicing as an 8 and 9 year old. So I was very, very good at that job. And I feel like I'm good at podcasting, but I'm not like as good as I was at anchoring. So I feel that like I can understand that a little bit. Tell me about that fight with the ego versus passion and like, you know, doing something you're really passionate about versus doing something that looks really good to everybody else.
Oh, you are really good. These are really, really like it makes me really reflect a lot on that. I think in dance, I really couldn't have much ego. Like
Yeah.
it was, if you really think about it, like I was like the older dancer. My legs and feet weren't quote unquote good. I didn't have all of these like natural quote unquote ability. So definitely there was not much ego left. Anything left was like squished down. um I have one little story later, but so I think a lot of it, at least for dance, was really resting on my passion for dance. And it's because I love to do it so much. I'm like, I'm not going to let anybody stop me from my dreams. Like, no, like if you don't want to dance with me, that's fine, but you're not going to stop me from dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is just because I wanted to do it so badly. Like, is I think it's all resting on that passion, because I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people sometimes they ask me like, you're not getting any money from it. Yeah. You're not, and in fact, you're spending a lot of money on it. And it gives me so much pain, like both mentally and physically, right? Like I would wake up with my feet throbbing and like my feet toes are bleeding, like toenails falling off. And you're spending so much time and resources for what? And it's the simple answer is just because I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the most powerful thing. Just because you want to, you love it so much that it is worth it.
Mm-hmm. How do you move forward in the face of all of those doubts or questions about your ability?
I think, to be very honest, I think I'm still moving forward, like still finding that. And I think it's a very common thing with artists. That's one of the most I think differentiation between working at corporate versus being a dancer and an artist. I think being in corporate, every single time like we have a deliverable or a meeting or something like that, like it's a very clear um deliverable that is different from you, right? Like let's just say you have your spreadsheet, you review the spreadsheet with your boss, and your boss tells you, okay, these are the things that are good and these are the things that are not so good. And in dance, I had a trouble on separating the dance from the dancer. And so then we're like, okay, your legs and feet are not good, you're not quick enough, you're not fast enough, you're not smooth enough on all these things. And obviously being a new dancer, and I guess I didn't know, I wasn't equipped with that, and it kind of like got in it a little bit. I think I'm over that phase now. I'm able to say, okay, just because the dancing is not that great yet, you are still a good dancer. And even the best dancer in the world still has improvement.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it an art.
Mm-hmm. What does dance do to your soul?
Oh,
You know, I'm asking this because I know, because I know.
yeah. Oh, I think it fills it up.
Mm.
It brings it to life. Um, I I just feel alive. I feel like it's me. It's like it's almost I mean, I don't know anything about like life after death or anything like that, but it's sort of like it's something that calls to your heart. It brings you joy. And I realize actually for me, is the place I go to when I am happy or when I'm sad. In fact, actually, the more sad I am, that is the place I go to. And so there's something about it. It's sort of like it charges your soul battery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's how I would put it. Yeah.
For someone listening who has an idea of something they want to do, but they're doing the thing they thought would bring them joy, but that's not, what would be your advice, your push to them to follow their heart?
I would say the first thing is that, life is very short. Like I said, I think that was my biggest wake up call. Don't waste it. Like, you have one life and it is your decision. It really is. So start doing what you love. And it is not negotiable. What you need to find out is how. Not the should I, but how am I going to do it? That I think is the number one thing. Because I think people get so stuck on, oh, well, should I or should I not? Should I or should I not? And the more you think and the more like people you ask, like it confuses you.
Mm-hmm.
So like just sit down in that corner and really, really ask yourself. And if you don't know the answer to that, I think a good place to start is to think about what you like, what you love to do when you were young. When I think it's the time when your heart is at the purest and we are free out of sort of society's expectations or parents' expectations. What is that thing that made your heart tickle, kind of little thing. So I think that's a good place to start.
Oh, I love it. That's such great advice. Okay. Before I let you go, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about Money Boss. You just started Money Boss. So tell me what it is and how you're hoping to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. So Money Boss is sort of a financial education and awareness platform. I started it actually beginning of this year when we were hit with the pandemic, and obviously, dancers, artists, small businesses have been like hit really, really badly because of the pandemic. So I was like, let me do something that I can actually give back to the community. And then I realized that, wow, there's a huge need for it. So what Money Boss is a platform to educate and to provide awareness, financial education to everyone so that anyone can have financial freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ties back very, very closely then to when we have the financial, let's just say, stability, then we'll feel freer to pursue our dreams. So it really goes hand in hand in what I believe in. And now I'm able to give these tools to people. And we're actually offering, free sessions every single month to anybody who wants to join us. So yeah, so we're trying to spread the love around.
I love that. Will you send me a link to it so that I can make sure it's in show notes?
Yeah, absolutely. I will do that.
Okay, the last question I want to ask you is what I ask everyone. How do you find more joy in the everyday, in the good, the bad, and the in between?
Oh, so this is actually so timely. So I have always been the kind of person who saw accomplishment as a way to joy. And what I have recently uncovered for myself is that on the other side of accomplishment should be the side of the coin called pleasure. I think we forget about that, or I forget about that too often. So how I find joy in everyday life is to find pleasure in everything that I do. And I will ask myself, not like last time it would be like, how can I be better at this? What are the improvement areas? Now I'm asking myself, how can I get more pleasure in doing this? Like, yeah, I think it's that. I think that will balance it out.
I love that. That is such great advice. Novell, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I absolutely loved talking to Novell. I hope you appreciated this conversation and feel that little spark or fire in your heart to follow something that you believe in and that you have a passion for. And with that, I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.